all began on December 7, 1975, when the Indonesian army invaded East Timor.
Only 300 miles north of Australia, East Timor was a Portuguese colony.
The Indonesian troops, backed by planes and warships, invaded the territory which had belonged to Portugal for 400 years.
East Timorese have been fighting them since.
2 days before the invasion, President Gerald Ford and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger were in Indonesia to meet the country's president, General Suharto.
I raise my glass and propose a toast.
A conflict, a killing ground in a remote area of the Far East, where up to 200,000 people have died from massacres and famine over the last 16 years.
East Timor is an occupied territory, with Indonesia violating UN resolutions.
The Catholic Church says human rights abuses are widespread.
Graphic photos of Indonesian soldiers torturing young East Timorese men. If you feel uncomfortable, we advise you to turn your attention elsewhere.
Timorese resistance has survived in the jungle, trying to keep the idea of independence alive.
East Timor is recently open to tourism, but journalists are not allowed.
I first visited East Timor in 1990. Up until that time, it had been completely cut off from the outside world.
There was, on the one hand, this terrible anxiety. At the same time, I derived some sense of enjoyment from the fact that this was going to be very risky. That appealed to me. I had a video camera, which immediately meant that I was the subject of great suspicion. The whole place was just a hive of paranoia. There was a man keenly interested in why I was there. It was pretty clear to me that he was an intelligence agent. He confronted me at one point to ask whether I was a journalist, and I said to him, no, I'm just a tourist here documenting my holiday, and the camera is just, you know, part of my happy snaps to show to family and friends. I remember crying myself to sleep one night because the tension was too much to bear. I didn't quite anticipate the beauty of the country. These beautiful mountains, this pristine turquoise sea. Throughout that first visit, I was being passed notes, messages to be sent out abroad. And I was often able to help out with translations into English.
Were you handed any photographs?
Yeah, I was given a number of photographs.
extremely dramatic images.
Were there photos of Xanana?
Yeah, there were photos of Xanana. But of course, I'd seen his image prior to that.
From his jungle hideout in the mountains of East Timor, Xanana Gusmao delivers a message of resistance. Very little is known about this enigmatic warrior poet who fights with both his pen and sword. As the commander of the armed resistance known as Falun Till, Xanana inspires his people with the cry, "To resist is to win."
My thoughts about Xanana were shaped by my Timorese friends. He was their hero, someone that they worshipped. He supposedly had magical powers to transform himself into a dog or into other animals. The stories abounded about how he managed to avoid being arrested. I probably had a very ordinary childhood. But certainly my parents were very special in that they had their eyes open to the world. When I was a child of about 4, my father went back to study Indonesian. So he would come home in the evenings and teach my brother and I some simple phrases. Apa kabar? How are you? Baik-baik saja. It was on the strength of that childhood connection that I decided to study Indonesian as an elective. And it was there that I stumbled across an issue of Inside Indonesia. It was not of the common mould of publications about Indonesia. It was actually hard-hitting.
We were basically saying there's more to Indonesia than Suharto and the military. There's more to Indonesia than Bali, the morning of the world, the most beautiful holiday destination one could possibly imagine, or the other extreme, East Timor.
I'd had a few thoughts and perceptions of my own that I was keen to share. So I tried to find out where it was published and how I could get involved.
She could turn her hand to anything. She could write, she could translate, she could edit.
Pat came to be a very important mentor to me.
This is the old Inside Indonesia office here.
Through Pat, I met a number of important political activists and dissidents such as Jose Ramos Horta. He was someone very charismatic, very much linked in people's minds to the struggle in much the same way Xanana was.
I had just made one of my yearly trips to Australia to campaign for Timor, to talk to solidarity groups. I walked into the office one day and there she was, very pretty, proper in her manners, also very committed to East Timor.
Suharto opened up East Timor at the beginning of '89. By that stage, there was a steady trickle of brave souls wanting to expose the reality of what was going on there.
The next time I travelled to East Timor, it was part of a documentary filmmaking team.
We flew into Bali. We decked ourselves out in Bali t-shirts to look as innocuous as possible. Used the time there to hone our skills and our moves as tourists.
We came forward with the idea of being adventure tourist front runners. So if anybody asked me what I was doing, I would enthusiastically engage them in a discussion about the possibilities for adventure tourism in Timor.
Wait, just 1 second, okay? I'll be with you. Sorry.
Kirsty was employed by the producer as interpreter, as a person who had been to Timor as well. She'd been only for a week, but at that stage that was a lot. There was nobody else who'd been there at all.
Okay, smile, please. Done.
I was quite anxious about how easy it would be to pull off this huge stunt that we were planning.
Why are we stopping here?
I don't know. Kirsty, think we can take pictures here? Is it okay? Yeah? Well, ask anybody. Ask just, you know. Can move back. No, this way, against the wall.
I was trying to find a way to film without getting my camera taken away, getting kicked out of the country.
There were moments where I found it extremely difficult to actually contain my disgust and to actually do the job I was supposed to be doing.
And you'd be catching glances and exchanging glances with people you didn't know. You'd see in people's eyes who were too scared to be seen.
There was such a desperate desire to have the story told and to actually be able to make contact with journalists and with people like us.
I got information that there was a television crew who wanted to meet with Xanana Guzmão. Xanana wanted to see them, of course. Unfortunately, the situation was so tense. He was the most wanted man in Timor. Everybody in Timor wanted to protect Xanana. So many people died for him, to protect him. The media, information became our most powerful weapon. The journalists were the only people we trust to channel our grievances abroad. So I organized for them to interview some young people.
Temos agora numa crise muito grande. A crise do invasor indonésio, do governo indonésio, que vem há 15 anos. O tempo nosso, estamos agora a dizer o pensar do nosso povo. Não vamos agora tardar o que estamos a pensar.
This demonstration had very provocative banners supporting Xanana. They walked straight past me towards the entrance to the Santa Cruz Cemetery where they gathered.
Pacífico no sentido de não utilizar armas, não atacar os indonésios. Já vimos que os militares indonésios já aproximaram-nos na altura.
These are military police, Brimob as they call them in Indonesia. Not all of them are in charge, though. These are the guys that are in charge. These people. I was just setting up to start filming. I was very determined to try to capture what was going on, or something of it.
Quando ouvi tiro, lancei por terra e senti que houve dores na minha costa traseira.
Clearly, these guys are surrounding this place and they're going to capture everybody in it. And that's going to include me. So I stopped the tape, put it into a plastic bag, bury it in a grave that was next to me. For the first time, East Timor was front-page news everywhere in the world.
A conflict, a killing ground in a remote area of the Far East is just beginning to get the world's attention. That is because Western reporters were inside Indonesia when soldiers opened fire on a group of civilians.
Up to 200 people are thought to have been killed when troops opened fire on an independence demonstration last week.
80 or so, maybe 100 people taken out in trucks and executed by a firing squad.
Dozens of demonstrators gathered outside the Indonesian embassy. Their wreaths a tribute to those who were slaughtered by Indonesian troops.
So many of the people that we had just spent time with and recorded their stories being gunned down in that massacre. It was dreadful.
The shootings at the Santa Cruz Cemetery have galvanized Portuguese public opinion.
That was the beginning of the end of the Indonesian occupation. Indonesia had no other ways to manipulate the international community's opinion.
The Indonesian ambassador said that the Indonesian troops opened fire on the demonstrators in self-defense.
The Timorese hope the massacre will focus Western attention on the repression which has cost the lives of 200,000 people since the country was annexed by Indonesia 16 years ago.
After the experience of making the film and the aftermath, I really wanted to be closer to the heart of the action. So I managed to make some contacts in Indonesia.
In Jakarta, there were constant Friday afternoon cocktail parties, and so I would invite Kirsti. And the two of us, we would be telling the diplomats and consultants in the gentlest, nicest way about what was happening in East Timor to take on board some of these issues. It was easier to do it in twos. We were like two little conspirators, really.
I met Victoria on one of my earliest visits to Jakarta. We both had a strong love for Indonesia in spite of being aware of the horrors that were happening at so many levels in the country.
There were quite a lot of Timorese students in Jakarta. And when they saw the footage of the Santa Cruz massacre, they decided that something needed to be done.
When November 12 happened, in Dili, we planned a demonstration in Jakarta.
There was a growing student movement. There's this sense that finally we have this opportunity to actually get the word out and communicate what we want, what our deepest aspirations are for ourselves and for our country.
Never before had Timorese students held a demonstration in Indonesia because it was forbidden to hold demonstrations, especially for the Timorese. They started walking in formation with their posters. Zhuang was right in the front. I was walking backwards, taking photos.
We distribute the statement to the UN and to all the embassies that we passed through. We asked the UN to support the Timorese struggle for independence, to free the Timorese from the human rights violations in the country.
Within 5 minutes, intelligence was called. They'd all been arrested.
In the court, they start saying that, well, you were against the president and against integration of Timor to Indonesia, so you are charged with subversion. The penalty that you will get will be life, or you can be punished to death. If you apologize to His Excellency President Suharto, you will be released. And when you finish your studies, go back to Timor, you can become head of districts, even governor. And I said, I don't have this ambition. I have the ambition to have my country free, independent. If you kill me, I don't care. They said, well, then you will go to prison. I said, I'm ready to face that situation.
If you are in Indonesia in hospital or in prison, there's nobody who looks after you to bring you food or the necessary things. So I took on these kind of jobs for all of the ones that one by one disappeared into Indonesian prisons.
Victoria had to leave Jakarta, so she left me in charge of the liaison with the prison.
There was a big block for the Timorese political prisoners.
I had the responsibility in ensuring that Zhuang had a constant supply of funds, medicine, books, things to sustain him in his daily life. I also was channeling funds from Amnesty International to Zhuang and to the other East Timorese political prisoners inside Cipinang prison.
The 20th of November, 1992, the news on the BBC was completely devastating, namely Xanana had been captured.
It was at this house in Dili that the Indonesian army finally arrested Xanana after a 16-year search. They waited in silence for him as he emerged from a secret hideaway below a cupboard.
When Xanana was arrested in Timor, for us was really very sad. You fought for an objective, and all of a sudden you see your leader is in the hands of the enemies.
The leader of East Timor's resistance movement, today sentenced to life imprisonment after being convicted of leading a separatist movement and illegal possession of weapons.
It seemed like a terrible blow at the time to the people's morale and their will to resist.
Also, as Xanana prepared to read his defence plea this week, the judge stopped him, saying it was irrelevant. But a smuggled-out copy reveals that he planned to begin a hunger strike 4 days ago. In the statement, he says it's the Indonesian government that should be on trial for its crimes over 17 years.
The Indonesians, they didn't want Xanana to join us in the same prison, so he didn't eat. Moving Xanana to Cipinang was our strategy. We prepared a room for him in our block.
Por efeito na prisão. Por efeito na prisão. Por efeito. Passou? Ok. Beni, Beni João, Sinirua. Foi de mana na vida dele. E disse, Beni maga, Beni lá no Brasil. E nem fatem dá por magné. Dá por magné. E não como possível. Allah, sini compri de macraik ni. Amina lima dit, mas compro para barak. Beni makin ni, benar ni orang. Malang berat mati. Te ingali. Ui Nepal. Ni akar katur Nepal ni wah ni dia. Ui meni lima ni. Ui so. Jangan Nepal. Beni Nepal makin ni. Beni agora sai cozinheiro, sai padeiro.
Manas, Pak.
Manas.
Betul kita.
Kau tahu mah.
Xanana has this kind of charismatic way of dealing with other people. So he became a very good friend of all prisoners, even security people. Some call him my president, some call him my commander. We had to write, to respond letters, so we did everything inside, and then we send through security people, and then they give to our people outside the prison.
Everyone that was involved in the clandestine movement had a code name. I adopted Ruby Blade. So began my double life as Ruby Blade.
When you operate in Jakarta in support of the resistance, you have to be extremely careful, disguising your identity. You have to be absolutely discreet. The way she is, very refined, elegant. Who would think that she can be mischievous?
The forces of good are about to go into action.
I start to use her often as courier. Going back and forth to Xanana Guzman when he was in prison.
I played an active role in couriering information, documents, interviews in and out of the prison. It was a big sense of responsibility to play the role of conveyor of information, being able to make sure that his letters to presidents and world leaders, to people like Ramos Horta, actually reach their destination.
She would courier money for Xanana, for the resistance, and he would bribe prison officials. He was referred to the 6 or 12 prison guards who were under his payroll as my staff. So every month he was paying $50 something to each prison guard, a lot of money. Once she established more frequent communication with Xanana, then she started conveying to him some very important documents from me, audio cassettes mostly, whereby in voice I would communicate with Xanana, and Xanana would communicate to me in voice.
Companheiro Ramos Horta, a declaração expressará o repúdio à integração e ressaltará o compromisso para o diálogo, mas sob prévio reconhecimento do Estatuto Político de Timor-Leste à luz do direito internacional. Vais-me desculpar, mas eu vou fumar.
I can still remember listening to the first audio cassette and just being so blown away by hearing Xanana speak, because I had never heard his voice before. We were able to become increasingly more sophisticated in our means of communications, starting with audio cassettes and then computers, video cameras, finally a mobile phone.
Nothing happened without Xanana's green light. He was the one directing the resistance in all the fields, military, political, clandestine work, or diplomatically. Any new initiative had to be clear with him. So Kirsty was a critical link.
Email. This was just like this most sophisticated weapon and just this incredible resource that virtually no one at that point had access to.
Xanana was emailing me. He wouldn't email directly. He would type up and Kirsty would email it to me. And he was talking certain internet language that made me embarrassed. I said, what the hell is he talking about? Does he know more internet than me? He's in prison and he knows more internet than me. So I said, God, I better update my own knowledge of internet.
See how we can undermine the regime.
These are photographs taken inside my home in Tebet Timur Dalam, which was actually not far from Cipinang prison.
When I came to her house, I would find her with the latest letter from prison, and we'd be reading it, rejoicing in some of the things and despairing with others. And while we were sitting there was a knock on the gate, and Kirsty would be coming back with an armful of bonsai trees. And I said, was there a hawker outside selling bonsai trees? No, she said, fancy this. They're coming from Xanana himself, from the prison. And then I looked at all the other bonsais that were already in the garden.
A form of prisoner rehabilitation was the cultivation of bonsai plants. And Xanana took to this activity with some great gusto. And very proudly would send me out samples. So you can imagine, you know, the poor courier guy that would bring these things in at a prison, you know, to turn up at my door lugging these, these plants. spent quite a lot of time on creating the nicest possible conditions for his tropical fish inside his cell. I think the first fish he sent me were Spanish fighting fish. 5 July 1995, 11:15 p.m. Hi, darling. I'm writing to you to talk about the fish. 1, you'll need to change the water every second day. Afterwards, I'll send you another bowl. It's just a question of time for me to arrange some little things, ornaments, to make the fish's life less monotonous and wearisome, as they're in the water without any ornaments. Never wash the bowl out with soap. You can rub the surrounding wall, but not the base, so that you can allow moss to start growing. As these stupid animals eat moss, take care of the animals. I would film myself watering his bonsais. He would film himself in his cell. And it was just about enhancing that sense of, whilst being separate, a sense of a shared life together in the most strange, unorthodox circumstances. I feel another sensation in trying to be dishonest when I told you I'd only woken up a little while ago and didn't telephone you. It's a good feeling. It's agreeable when one feels that one is lying to oneself. 11:30 p.m. You still haven't arrived. I'm probably going to keep this characteristic, being dishonest to myself. Now I'm going to bed because I'm beginning to feel sleepy. 1:17 a.m.
Benny? Mom? How go hunting? I'm combined John. How come saya ketua zona? How saya ni ketua zona? Kami sini semua tu. Mularan dit.
Amo mularan dit non. Aduh.
Hindi masa.
Sabihin mo ba service mo magpada mularan dit.
Mangawas, ha?
O selfal mo.
Ni magam ni ro combined dia na. Am hella hala muki ko ni dia. Mugi ko ni. Muito ono me. Sai ketua staan.
I was a bit shocked when I heard, after all, they had a relationship. What would that mean for the resistance? Would that mean for Xanana's image, for Kirsty's effectiveness? As far as I'm concerned, I do not recall ever commenting that particular relationship with anyone.
I had serious doubts. Why me? Is it just because I'm the only one, really? It's not like he has a whole lot of choices. Xanana is in a very lonely environment and would have craved that intimacy with someone. That was a great source of anxiety and angst for me for quite some time. But certainly by the time I gained my first entry, and these are photographs of our first meeting face-to-face in Chipinang in December 1994. Certainly by then there was already a very strong bond. We had the most amazing few hours together. We were able to sit together, we were able to converse together. We were conscious that we may not, for a very long time, be able to repeat this experience. So we were just intent on being able to enjoy and revel in every single moment of togetherness.
Sanana has a mobile phone in the prison. Sanana told me that we have changed our strategy to win the war. You have to go to Jakarta to work with the Indonesian pro-democracy movement. The Indonesians, they also suffer under dictatorial regime. So when change happen in Indonesia, it will allow us to have a referendum in East Timor. I contact with one of my friends in Jakarta. He said that one lady from Australia wants to meet you. So-called special courier.
Xanana introduced me to Putu as we knew him back then, and to another colleague called Komoro. Xanana asked me to offer whatever help I could.
The government and the media always campaign that East Timorese has chosen integration, but actually we want to independent. So how we change the mentality of Indonesians themselves, how we can work together with the pro-democracy movement.
Kirsty memberikan dukungan sepenuhnya untuk perjuangan Timor Leste dan gerakan demokrasi Indonesia. Saat itu saya kebetulan menjadi aktivis Partai Rakyat Demokratik, satu kelompok kiri ya yang secara terbuka menyatakan oposisi terhadap Orde Baru Soeharto. Saya adalah sebagai petugas yang menghubungkan antara gerakan Timor Indonesia dan gerakan Timor Leste.
We had a meeting with Kirsty to organize because she really have a good connection to all different organizations. Amnesty International and Human Rights and actually all the journalists.
Saya pikir dukungan dari media dan jaringan internasional yang membuat aksi tersebut.
She had appeared somewhat mysteriously on the radar, introducing herself through faxes and various letters. I didn't know her real name was Kirsty. I really only knew her as Ruby Blade. And she said, look, something's going to happen in a couple of weeks. I'm not at liberty to say exactly what it is, but it may be something that leads to some human rights problems. We want Amnesty to know about it.
About 50 protesters demanding independence for East Timor forced their way into the Russian embassy in the Indonesian capital, marking the day 20 years ago when Indonesia forced its way into the former Portuguese colony.
Sanana asked me to lead the demonstration of 7 December. All my comrades, especially pro-democracy members, we all jammed together.
The pro-independence demonstrators were not all East Timorese. A third were said to be Indonesian.
Kami menduduki dua kedutaan untuk minta bertemu dengan perwakilan PBB untuk menyatakan bahwa Timor Leste harus sesegera mungkin diadakan referendum.
At the same time as the protest here, about 60 demonstrators also managed to get inside the Dutch embassy.
Kirsty menjadi penting karena dia mengorganisir dengan media kampanye internasional.
Typically, it would take a matter of days to gather sufficient information about an event like this and then produce a report about it. If you were lucky, more likely it would be weeks. In this case, we had all the information. And we prepared a 4-page report, complete with photographs, biographical details, and then we circulated it around to Amnesty offices, causing the Indonesian foreign minister to accuse Amnesty of orchestrating the event. It was organized. It's just that it wasn't Amnesty that organized it.
In the lead up to that action, I would often, just purely for practical reasons, encourage people to come to my home. That drew much more attention to my place of residence. So that contributed to there being a greater awareness amongst the intelligence community of my existence. No, well look, I mean, once they're in the hands of the police, I mean, there's very little that anyone can do except for listen to. I'd heard clicks on the line and I knew there was a pretty good chance that my phone was being tapped.
What was that?
I started receiving visits from members of the Indonesian military. I was fortunate enough not to actually be home at the time. My maid told me that there had been this visit and a lot of questions asked. Who I was, what I was doing in Jakarta.
Bukan polisi menurut saya, intelijen tentara, military intelijen, dan juga teleponnya mulai disadap.
One of the protesters, he was captured and he mentioned the place where we had a meeting before.
I was with her on the phone. She said, I have to run because the Indonesians are chasing me.
If I'd shown my face on the street, I was likely to have got arrested. Stories circulating that my photo would be posted at airports. So with the help of friends, I managed to work out an alternative route back to Australia. When I got back to Melbourne, I discovered I'd been blacklisted. But I did return to Indonesia through fairly devious means. Inside one of my first letters to Xanana, I enclosed a photograph of me in a beautiful, idyllic landscape in Java. And it was a photograph where you couldn't see my face, and I considered it at the time to be safe to send into the prison. For my birthday the following year, Xanana sent me a painting he had done of the photograph. I sent him a photograph of me gazing at the painting, and he subsequently did a painting of that. This continued for a number of years until we had a series of paintings and photographs that we referred to as the Tunnel of Time. He was unable to complete the painting of the final photograph because of very rapid political developments inside Indonesia.
Second day, Jakarta echoed to gunfire as police, backed by troops, made a vain attempt to curb street protests.
Complete anarchy here at the moment. The police is totally outnumbered by the people.
It was the moment the people of Indonesia had been demanding for months. After 32 years of power, President Suharto finally resigned. Before he'd even finished speaking, jubilation erupted at Parliament, where thousands of students were occupying the complex for the fourth day.
After Suharto had fallen, Xanana was moved into house arrest. It wasn't until then that there was any sense that there might be some sort of future for us. that point. We developed a very strong sense of teamwork. The political situation inside Indonesia had changed dramatically in relation to East Timor.
This is a historic moment. I am delighted to tell you that we have just signed the 3 agreements on East Timor, as you saw, between the Republic of Indonesia and the Republic of Portugal.
We will be offering to the East Timorese people a choice, a special status within the Indonesian Republic with wide-ranging autonomy, or to go our separate ways in an honorable, peaceful way.
I was extremely critical of the May 5th agreement. It was obvious the agreement had huge flaws. One that gave security responsibility to Indonesia. But Xanana was absolutely wise in saying, regardless of the flaws, we must seize this opportunity.
And I can remember having a conversation with Xanana, tension in his voice as we spoke, because I think he realised we're on the verge of something really big here and this could be what we've been fighting all these years for.
The United Nations staff are already on their way to the region to begin preparing for the popular consultation. All of us are determined to ensure that it is free, fair and thorough.
When I arrived in East Timor with the United Nations and saw the UN flag there, it was extremely moving to me. The UN had this mythical stature. It was if the UN could just be here, things might turn out differently.
Via phone, Xanana was able to maintain regular contact to get a sense of what the mood, what the morale was in East Timor. There were a lot of rumours, there were a lot of informal intelligence reports that indicated that there was something big planned and that it was being coordinated at the highest levels.
There were a number of things. The first was that there were these militia groups set up by the Indonesian army. Overwhelmingly young Timorese guys. They typically were wearing red and white bandanas, the colors of the Indonesian flag. We saw them all over the place in the company of the army. They were in army and police trucks. They would hold rallies and the army would be around there watching them as they threatened people, quite deliberately provoking violence. There was a real danger that the pro-independence side would be led into a violent clash. What Xanana did at that moment, against all of the pressure to fight back, was to say, our side will not use violence. And you can continue to torment and burn and attack, but we will not be provoked.
Xanana forbid the volunteer to respond to the provocations and to the violence. A very difficult decision because the natural instinct of those men was to defend the people.
Xanana got a lot of phone calls, passing information that big tragedy will happen. Xanana said, keep everything in your heart. If they ask you to put the Indonesian flag in front of your house, do it. They will not know what you have in your deep heart. Vote for independence. They don't know that. You vote for independence.
The day of the referendum was really extraordinary. People walked, some of them 4 or 5 hours, to get to the polling station. And most people were in line before the polling booths opened at 6:30 in the morning. People were coming to the polls with their rice and their cooking pots and their blankets. Everybody knew that there would be violence. So they came to vote, and then they were going to be refugees.
All the people lined like this. And even under sun, hot sun, they are there because they are sure that that moment is the crucial moment for the country. They have to be there and vote for independence.
After the polls closed, it was really quiet. We were driving back through Dili, and there were people out on the street, and we were sort of waving to them, and they were going, just quite subdued, actually. Essentially, they were doing whatever they could to avoid provoking any kind of violence.
In a show of courage and determination, the people of East Timor turned out in massive numbers to vote in the popular consultation, expressing their will as to the future of the territory.
We were anticipating that unless the results were tampered with, that there would be an overwhelming decision in favour of independence.
Yes. The people of East Timor have thus rejected the proposed special autonomy and expressed their wish to begin a process of transition towards independence.
There was no celebration at all. Things were so desperate on the ground in Timor at that time that no one really felt like celebrating.
And the militias are moving freely up the road, and there's quite a number of them, and I'm running. Jesus.
Suddenly, there were militiamen running towards us from all directions, wielding machetes. They were screaming incoherently.
And the police again seemed unable or unwilling to stop them.
Armed gangs now have control across East Timor. The bloodbath, retribution against East Timor's independence vote.
I promise, as a free man, I will do everything to bring peace to East Timor and to my people.
They announced Xanana was going to be released 24 hours or so before.
Xanana, how do you feel, sir? Is it safe to go back at the moment?
There was a lot of anti-East Timor sentiment, so it was quite a security situation. He was released into the British embassy. For security reasons, he wasn't able to return immediately to East Timor.
As we go to air, fresh clashes have erupted in East Timor, this time in the capital, Dili itself, right outside the offices of the United Nations mission in East Timor.
The violence, which had been pretty serious, suddenly became much more serious. The United Nations staff, all staff, were confined to the UN compound. And we were joined there by perhaps as many as 2,000 East Timorese refugees and several hundred local East Timorese UN staff.
This gate's getting old, but you can still see the sign of the UN here. Timorese has been terrifying for the 24 years, but that day, the most terrifying moment, when they started hearing the gunshot getting closer and closer.
There we were, completely unarmed, surrounded by militias and by the police and the army who were supposed to be preserving order, who weren't doing anything. Everything outside of the compound was on fire. You could hear weapons fire. You could see black smoke rising from the city. Dili and all surrounding areas were being systematically destroyed.
There were some militia guys on that hill. The gunshot coming from here, the gunshot coming from that area.
A bunch of people who had been just outside became extremely scared. Somebody in desperation threw their child, a baby, up over the fence in the hope that
living that violence from a distance was extremely difficult and distressing.
It was really difficult, especially for Shannon as commander. It was really difficult.
I appeal to the international community to help these heroic, so defenseless people, to stop the violence, to stop the killings.
Shannon was desperate, beside himself. He was just on the phone with General Taur Mataruak, who was in the cantonment, and Shannon said Taur Mataruak was very angry with the international community because no one was doing anything, people were being killed. Taur Mataruak said, merda para a comunidade internacional. Then hung up. I managed to speak to Taur Mataruak. I said, compañero, this is a time to close ranks behind our commander-in-chief. Listen to him, stay in the camp. Shanana's orders and the decision by Taur Mataruak, Valentil, not to respond weapon with weapon, fire with fire, killing with killing, that was the wisest.
Xanana and Jose Ramos Horta decided that a visit to friendly nations around the world was imperative. And there was a lot of work to be done shoring up support from the international community to have international peacekeepers allowed onto Timorese soil.
Breakfast reading.
A presença de forças indonésias em Timor-Leste tem causado apenas sofrimento, tem permitido apenas destruição, tem permitido apenas assassinatos, perseguições e matanças indiscriminadas. É desta forma, é neste sentido que apelo aqui ao Congresso americano para que use da sua força moral e política para impor imediatamente a retirada total das forças indonésias do território de Timor-Leste.
¡Viva
Xanana came ahead first to Timor. He was still not completely comfortable that there was secure conditions. But within 24 hours called me to say, you can come. The thing that impressed me when I first arrived was, my God, this country has been completely shattered. People may have no shoes on their feet, they may have no home to go to. They may have just lost all of their belongings and lost family members. But the people look happy.
Itulah koleksi yang kita sila tahu kita sulu buat tu destroy buat tu kata kita lah bele. Hari ini media, oi, hari ini matan, oi lorong itu hamnasa tambah. Abang ben rua, itu sehari di telefon. Tambah itu mos, Emma, Hanesan, povo toma que mundo não vem direito a tu, livre, e agora livre. Povo brani, Timor-Leste!
There was this jubilation, and yet it was tempered always by the grief and by the wounds that were still so fresh. We did a tour around the country. The reaction to Xanana, to his physical presence, was a source of joy, but it also elicited a lot of deep emotion and grief in people, particularly women. I can remember thinking, my goodness, how can he possibly have anything left after that? And to then have to get in a car to travel another hour to go to the next village and to face it all again. And day after day after day of the same. Amazing for me to witness, and I guess to have confirmed that love that people felt for him. I knew he'd always put the public and the political first, and I knew that that would guide all major decisions that he would make.
Today, you are witnesses of the aspiration for peace of all people. And today, you are witnesses to the hope for a future.
I found myself pregnant with my first son. So it seemed really the ideal time to get married.
Oh, send me, oh, send me, oh, send me, oh.
It was extremely important at the emotional level to give birth to my first son on Timorese soil.
Send me, oh, send me, all we see is out of reach. All we see is home. It's a big boy. It's gonna walk to mummy.
In many ways, the growth and development of our first son, Alexandre, went on a parallel course with Timor-Leste's own growth and development as a young nation.
Follow me, follow me, follow me on to me. Follow me, follow me back home. Follow me, oh, send me. Follow me, oh, send me. Follow me, oh, send me.
An individual does have the power to make a difference.
That lesson is a gift from the Timorese people to the world.
Follow me, follow me, follow me on to me. Follow me, follow me back home. Follow me back, follow me, send me.
I share with you all a big Timor-Leste hug of Obrigado Barack.
Send me home. Follow me, oh, send me. Follow me, oh, send me.
That's in Portugal.
Send me follow me, all we see.
Sunday at 9:25, the Iraq War. Get the inside story of one of the biggest mistakes the United States government and its allies have ever made. Next, David Mitchell perfects the dark art of the